So this month our theme has been Speaking Truth to Circumstance. Today's talk title is Standing on Shiva. And I wasn't familiar with this story, but there's a Hindu story that goes like this. The gods and the demons were battling each other, and the demons started to win. And so the gods reached out to Goddess Durga, the goddess of compassion, and said, "Please help." And what happened was, out of the goddess Durga's forehead burst the goddess Kali. And Kali is depicted with the head of the demon often. And she came and she killed the demons. And she killed the hardest demon to kill. And I couldn't pronounce the name of that demon, but that particular demon, every time you would strike it with a sword, and each time a drop of blood would hit the ground, it would replicate itself. And so she ended up doing this miraculous thing of, well, it's kind of gory, so I won't go into that part, but she destroyed the hardest demon. But one of the parts of the story is that she was standing on Shiva. And Shiva is known by many things, but Shiva is also known as the destroyer of illusion. So basically, because Kali was standing on truth, she was standing in her power and was able to destroy those demons. So I was thinking we could relate this story to our own lives, right? We could think of the gods and the demons as our own thoughts. So sometimes we're having good God thoughts, and sometimes we're having what we could call evil thoughts. And so there's that battle going on within us. We could be for some things and for people, and against some things and against some people. But herein lies the illusion. There's no such thing as duality, right? We're only one thing, the itness, the allness, the beingness of all that is. And so this is where we get to do our work, to rein in our thoughts, to bring our thoughts back into the truth that we are one, and to let go of that illusion of duality. So one of the things that we think when we're in living from duality is, if only that person would change and do what I wanted them to do, then I would be fine. Life would be so much better. And I hear some people laughing, so I'm not the only one that has felt that way, gratefully. In the rooms of the 12-step community, we admit that we are powerless over people, that our lives have become unmanageable, and we need to turn our will and our lives over the care of God, of our understanding. So when I first arrived in AA over 30 years ago, I had already survived a suicide attempt. I survived a motorcycle accident in which I was drunk and stoned, and I only had a swimming suit, Birkenstocks, and no helmet on. That was before the helmet laws went into effect. I flunked a drunk driving test, and gratefully, by the grace of God, did not go to jail or kill anyone. So I had lost a relationship, and I was suffering. I was in pain. But pain is the great motivator. And I felt determined to live and begin to pick up the pieces of my life and to heal the self-inflicted spiritual trauma. So, after healing from an alcohol addiction, I was continuing to peel the onion of recovery. And when I looked in the mirror, what I saw was my codependent self. Oh my goodness. That was a lot of work, codependent self. I think I'm still working on that one today. So our recovery process is I hear this in the peer work that I do. It's not a straight line up, right? Recovery is not a straight line up. It comes with hills and valleys and mountains to climb and canyons to fall into. But the process is perfect. I know the process is perfect. And we're all returning back to the one. We're just reawakening and remembering who we are. So what we learn in the science of mind is that the control of conditions happens within our own consciousness, right? We don't try and control the conditions because that can be crazy making. And so we go within to discover what is ours to do, what needs to be healed. In the Hindu story, the gods reached out to Durga, the goddess of compassion, for help. And compassion is defined by Merriam-Webster as sympathetic consciousness of others' distress together with a desire to alleviate it. We are naturally called to alleviate our own suffering and others' suffering. As our founder Ernest Holmes reminds us, the world has learned all it should through suffering. So there's a story I recently read, and don't quote me on this, but Ram Dass said that in the 60s, he was in India studying with his guru, and a lot of his friends were taking to the streets and they were protesting the war. And he felt bad because he felt like he wasn't doing what he should be doing to help right the injustices in the world that he was seeing. And so it took him a while, but he finally came to a place of peace within himself when he realized that the spiritual work that he was doing was just as important. So each of us needs to go within and figure out what is mine to do. We can't save the world, but there are things that we can do to help create a world that works for all. And it's perfectly normal to feel upset about the state of our world. Oh my gosh, what a time to be on the planet. And we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So we need to allow ourselves those human emotions. One of the things I learned when I was going to ministerial school was that we were really focusing on not doing spiritual bypass. And if you don't know what that is a thing that could happen when we see something horrendous going out in the world, and instead of feeling our feelings and feeling sad and grieving about it, we just go, oh, I'm just going to focus on the positive. I'm going to ignore all the horrendous things that are going on in the world. And so we don't do spiritual bypass. I invite us not to do that, to embrace our humanity, embrace our feelings. But don't get stuck in the feelings. That's the key, right? Because our feelings are there to give us a message. And so we want to find out what is the message that our feelings are trying to tell us, and to move forward and do what's being called from Spirit for us to do. So one of the things that we start with is visioning. We vision, and visioning is getting our ego out of the way and opening up to Spirit to find out what Spirit is calling for us to do. But I just wanted to talk about where we are today. I mean, we are just now coming out of 3 years of being in lockdowns, being away from one another, losing our loved ones, losing our relationships. We have gone through a lot of loss. And we're seeing the effects now in the world. It's emotional for me. We're seeing mental health issues have skyrocketed. More people are out of work. There's more people living on the streets. More people are in crisis more than ever before. And I just have to share that, when I was living in Baja when COVID hit, and one of the reasons why I live in Baja and the places that I do live, is because I learned from my challenges in life that my environment needs to be serene and peaceful and beautiful and quiet. I need that for my own well-being as a highly sensitive person. And so there I am in Baja, and I hear, this is what I hear, right? I hear that we are going to have to wear masks, that the beaches will be closed, and that we have to stay at least 6 feet away from each other and not hug one another. Well, I was raking my yard when I heard this news, and the thought that occurred to me was, oh my gosh, the world just went insane. That's what I thought because I had studied holistic health most of my life, and I knew that for my own well-being, I needed to walk on the beaches. I needed to breathe fresh air, and I needed to hug people. And so I just couldn't even imagine being a person that lives by myself, going for months on end without hugging another person. I really tried to imagine it and didn't even compute. I saw myself going insane, wandering through the neighborhood trying to find somebody to hug. It sounds silly, but it was really weird, really weird. And so it was a very hard time. But luckily, I wasn't the only person that thought this way. And so I did find a couple of people that would hug me. And I continued to walk, and I would sneak over to the beach. And I would stick my feet in that healing water that contains 92 minerals. And I did what I could. And I did wear a mask when I went to the store. But for the most part, my life didn't change until I went to the grocery store or I went to the restaurant to eat. And I had to wear a mask. And I have to say that was the most ridiculous thing ever. Really? Okay. Put it back on, right? So we have been living in this, coming out of living in this really strange condition in the world. And it was hard because almost everyone I know believed differently than I did. And so I don't particularly watch the news. I don't have a TV. I try and stay away from it. But I realized that people were suffering and people were in pain and people were scared. We were really scared. And so we did what we needed to do. And so the things I found scary were when I had to go get a PCR test to prove that I didn't have COVID in order to go to a concert. When people with vaccinations had been getting COVID and spreading COVID. Anyway, you know, those things seemed really scary to me. Like, I have to have a card to have my freedom that I normally would have. But so what happened for me was I had to change my perception because I was having a challenging time being in the world under these conditions. And so I stood on truth by reminding myself of that scripture. It is done unto us as we believe. And so knowing that God is each one of us in form, I let go and I let God be God as each one of us. And so I started supporting everybody. Whatever you need to do, do it. Because it is done unto you as you believe. And so that's what I needed to do to shift my perception so I could feel emotionally well. I was pretty distraught, and I know a lot of people were. And so there was this whole duality thing happening, right? So polarized. It was like, if you weren't doing this, you were the bad guy. If you weren't doing that, you were the bad guy. And people were dying. They were dying because of all kinds of reasons. But it was scary, and we're coming out of that now. I know it's taken a lot of us time to feel comfortable to come be with each other here. And we have to just have compassion, like when the gods reached out to the goddess of compassion, Durga. It's a reminder that we need to have compassion for ourselves. And one of the things that I'm reminded of also is that we're still here. We're in this together. We're strong. We're resilient. That same power that created the universe is in this body, and it's in that body. And we're all cells in the body of God, which is all of reality. And so when I stand on the truth, in the truth that I know, is that there's no power greater than the power of God. And that is in, through, and as us. We each have a unique life experience, and we each are in our own process of reawakening to the truth of who we are. And so we need to make decisions based on our own reality and our own experience. So let's have compassion for ourselves and each other during challenging times, because we're all doing the best we can, right? So in that Hindu story, when the gods and demons were battling, and the mother goddess Kali came to the rescue, and she was standing on truth. That's a reminder for us to do the same thing. Because that demon that she killed, the one where each drop of its blood replicated itself, we can relate to that as our own thoughts. And if we don't kill that demon, it will replicate. And those thoughts of separation and duality will replicate. And it will take us farther and farther away from the peace that we're searching for in our heart, the love that we have for one another. So I just want to point out that those thoughts sometimes are called evil. But evil spelled backwards is live. And so I invite us that when we notice that we're having a so-called evil thought, that we can flip the script and we can choose to have life-affirming thoughts and say those life-affirming things to ourselves and others, because whatever I say about myself, I'm saying about everyone else. So if I'm saying something negative, I'm hurting the whole, right? So this is the spiritual battle we get to fight. We get to fight those separation stories that come up in our mind. And I don't know about you, but I've noticed what I've found helpful for myself to keep those stories at bay is self-care. When I get good sleep, get good rest, eat good food, and also pray and meditate, I don't have very many of those stories pop up. So whatever you found to support yourselves, I highly encourage that. So here's our call to action. Identify an area of suffering, either in your own life or in the world that is calling to be alleviated. The first place to start is with visioning. What does Spirit have for us to do? And what do I need to release and become in order to have that vision happen? A lot of times we may be called to do something that's totally out of our comfort zone. But if we say yes, then we get to participate in creating this world that works for all. Every moment of every day, we are using the law of cause and effect with every thought, intention, and action. And we're doing it either consciously or unconsciously. Ernest Holmes said, "There is a power for good in the universe, and we can use it." So let's use that power for good. Let's be awake enough to notice if we are using it unconsciously or consciously. And if we're being unconscious, remind ourselves to flip the script and use life-affirming language. Let's choose our thoughts carefully, on purpose, and with passion to create a world that works for all, because we've remembered who we are. We are one in spirit, as spirit. And so it is.